listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. To hear the full show each day, tune in to AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN or log in to accesswdun.com and click the Listen Live button from 9 to 11, Monday through Friday.
In a protest that is saying radical Islam is a problem, somebody throws an IED at you, and then the mayor in which the city you live says, no, this was a protest of white supremacy and bigotry. Like, you become the problem. Like, get out of that city. I'm sorry, New Yorkers, I love you. Get the hell out of there. Those people hate you.
It is the Martha Zoller Show, and the voice you just heard was Michael Duncan, and he is one of the 4 guys on the Ruthless podcast, and we are so happy to have him here today. Michael, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Martha.
And you have a mustache now. Did I notice that?
Oh. I had it for a day. It was a nice goof. I've been growing a beard for a while,
I
thought I'd play around with the mustache. But unfortunately, I did shave it. You know, I don't think it was a good look, but it was fun.
Only Tom Selleck can do that. You know, I mean, he's still the guy that did the best mustache. I'm telling you. But anyway,
that's right.
What I love about you, and I'm so glad to have you here today, is that you are like the perfect mix of history, musical theater, and English literature on this program with your hat on backwards. So I don't know how you do all of that.
Yeah, I don't really know either. I guess it's sort of like a Dennis Miller vibe, you know, and he dabbled in politics, and you know, I made a career, you know, working in Republican politics. So it's fun. I feel like sometimes those references make politics more entertaining and more accessible to more people. So, yeah, we have a good time on Ruthless.
Yeah, so tell folks a little bit about kind of how you guys worked together for a long time, right? Because we've had John on the show a few times. And but then you did this podcast. It came out of COVID. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. You know, Josh, John, and I, 3 of the 4 members of Ruthless podcast, you know, we've been working together for about 11 years. Working on Republican campaigns, you know, working at our consulting firm. And so we've seen the ins and outs of you know, how to win campaigns, and how, you know, Republican politics works in Washington. And during COVID, you know, as everyone was sort of in D.C. on lockdown, you know, we started doing Zoom happy hours. Me, Josh, and John, and our buddy, Comfortably Smug, famous Twitter icon. And, you know, after doing a few of those, we started to think to ourselves, wow, this would be, you know, a great podcast. And, you know, as people who have been practitioners in the field for most of our careers, it was fun and it's kind of therapy at the time to have an opportunity to have a microphone and add your perspective to politics rather than just listening to people talk about what you do for a living.
Well, I tell you, I thought your episode, that was yesterday, and you'll have a new one coming out. They come out Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, talking about journalists, because I am one. You know, I still consider myself one, even though I do opinion. I still use actual sources. I use the rules that if you have an unnamed source, you need to verify it with 3 people before you go with it. And I know this sounds crazy, you know, that you should check what you're going to put out before you put it out there. And then, you know, if you have a name source, well, that's a whole different ballgame. But I loved what you brought out about the headlines that were coming out relating to that New York City attack. And I love New York City. My dad was from Jersey City. I have spent my life visiting New York either for work or for fun or for musical theater, whatever it is. And I don't want to go there anymore. And it was because we saw this wonderful, heroic police officer. His name is Aaron Edwards. 46 years old, so means he probably was in his early 20s when 9/11 happened. He's a chief. He was there at that protest, and there's that picture of him jumping over the stanchion and tackling the guy with the bomb. Now, that's what you want to see, and that's what you should be lifting up, and that's kind of what it is. But his story has only been told in conservative media. The so-called mainstream media wants to somehow blame the protesters, and I thought they were for peaceful protest, even if they didn't like what they were saying, instead of blaming the terrorists.
Yeah, I mean, so much of liberal media now, unfortunately, Martha, isn't about telling the truth or getting the story right or just the facts, ma'am. It's none of that. It's all about shaping the narrative. It's about story selection. It's about the perspectives they choose to write about. You know, we're at the point now, I mean, the initial run of all these stories obviously were willfully obtuse about what was going on here. It was an Islamic radical, too, who were throwing improvised explosive devices at peaceful protesters, and they've now turned that into an attack on the mayor, Zoran Mamdani, right? Abby Phillips was on CNN last night saying just that. And so the goal of all of this is just to obfuscate the truth and the reality of things. Instead of telling the story of that brave police officer, now our media is out there doing deep dives into these troubled young men and what we can learn about these men. They're giving them the Boston bomber treatment. It's disgusting.
Yeah, because they're young guys that came from kind of affluent neighborhoods, and we do have this problem now of I'm very concerned actually about the less about the immigrants that came in over the last 5 years and more about the gotaways, the 2 million gotaways, because I think we did a pretty good job of the people that we brought in, even though there were way too many of them, of identifying the ones that were on the terrorist watch list and turning them away. Okay, it wasn't a great job, but you at least have names of people and you could identify them. My biggest concern is the 2 million or so, who knows how many got away, that we don't even know what their names are. We don't even know where they are. We don't even know what they're doing. And a lot of them were military-age men from countries that don't like us.
Yeah, 100%, Martha. And think, we're having this conversation right now as the Department of Homeland Security is being shut down by the Democrats, a time while we're at war with the largest state sponsor of terrorism, Iran, where we've had multiple attacks here in recent weeks. We've got the shooting in Austin, the bomb scare on the airplane, and now these explosive devices in New York. And our DHS is shut down. I mean, if you want to disrupt terror networks or monitor the chatter of Islamic radicals in the United States, you need a funded DHS, and somehow the media is letting the Democrats get away with this.
Yeah, and, you know, we have a big Senate race down here, and John Ossoff only won by 50,000 votes 6 years ago. So based on where we are today, if we can have a good primary here, we should be able to beat him. I've had a decent relationship with him. I've had him on the show a few times. He's, you know, he will answer my questions about things. But I sent him a question this week that he did not answer. And it was that you guys need to change your mind on DHS, because if there's a terrorist attack, a big one, you know, it's going to be your fault. It's going to be your fault and Democrats who wouldn't fight on this. And, of course, he didn't answer that question.
Well, of course not, because a guy like Senator Ossoff ultimately is responsible to the radical left-wing caucus that actually controls their Senate conference. Chuck Schumer isn't really their minority leader in the United States Senate. It's AOC, it's the squad, it's the radical left that is telling them what to do, and they have their marching orders, and they want to make sure that those people vote for them in November, and so they're sort of captured entirely. And so, you know, common sense stuff like that, the calculus doesn't even come into the equation for them, unfortunately.
Yeah, do you see, because there was an article out a couple of days ago, I don't know if you saw it or not, about how this new polling shows that what Democrat voters want is normal. Okay, they want to get back to a more normal kind of party and get away from these fringe issues. That does not surprise me, because the Democrats that I meet, and granted, to be fair, the two districts that are closest to me and the one that I live in are plus 26 Republican districts. Okay, so we're pretty secure as far as electing Republicans, but at the same time, there are Democrats I come in contact with every day that I have to deal with, and that's what I hear from them. Is they're tired. They don't agree with the fringy issues, but they're still voting Democrat, and that's the problem.
Yeah, and Martha, you'd be shocked. You can find normal Democrats up here in Washington, D.C. as well. They just don't speak up. And the reason why they don't speak up is the loudest voices, the angriest voices, are the radical left. And so those people remain silent as the party drifts leftward because they're scared of the self-policing that happens within the Democratic Party. You know, so I mean, I think this is totally just a squeaky wheel gets the grease situation, is that these senators, these congressmen in the Democrat Party are hearing from the fringes of their party constantly. And so, you know, that's what they respond to. As the saying goes, politics goes to those who show up.
So I know it's always dangerous to predict things. And obviously, midterm elections generally go to the party that's out of power. I mean, with the exception of a couple of exceptions. But this is a unique time. When y'all are looking at this, what do you, I mean, you're talking to all the candidates. I'm talking to all the Georgia candidates. What are your thoughts about what's going to happen in the next 6 months?
Well, you know, you look at the results of that Georgia special last night. And, you know, while I think we're in a great position to win that runoff, you know, you do still worry about Republicans' historic underperformance in midterms, special elections, when Donald Trump's name's not on the ballot. And so, you know, the $8 million question of this cycle, as it was in 2018, is how do you mobilize the lower propensity midterm voters that are part of the Trump coalition to actually turn out for a midterm and vote for a Republican candidate with Trump's name not at the top of the ticket. And so that will be the deciding factor of whether Republicans win or lose the congressional races in the midterm.
No doubt. And in Georgia, you know, there are more Democrats that qualified in qualifying week last week than have in over 30 years. We've got Democratic primaries in these plus 26 districts with multiple candidates in them because I think they think we're not going to turn out. And, you know, I'm concerned about it. I'm not taking anything for granted. Let's just put it that way, Michael. The people I'm working with, as well as the messages I'm putting out there, I'm saying it's so important that people turn out to vote. Don't take anything for granted. If you go to vote, make sure you take 10 of your friends to vote too, and make sure you get them out there.
Yeah, and look, I mean, Governor Kemp has shown the ability to organize a ground game in the state of Georgia very, very well.
Yes.
And I think if Donald Trump is also leaned into this midterm, as all indications are he is, there's a lot of talk about this midterm convention and really making it feel like another presidential election for the president. Hopefully that helps, right? And, you know, if we can get turnout from those low propensity Trump voters in a midterm, I think we'll be just fine.
Absolutely. Well, you can listen to the Ruthless podcast on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. It is better in video, folks. I got to admit that. I listen in the car a lot, but my husband and I watch it too. Michael Duncan, I appreciate you being with me today.
Of course. Thanks, Martha.
It's local radio, and that's why you're listening. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
Joining me right now is Daniel Turner. We've talked to him before. He is the founder and executive director of Power the Future. And we want to talk a little bit about what people are concerned about. I mean, in your daily life, of course, you care about America. You support America. But in your daily life, you're paying about 50 cents more a gallon than what you were last week. And you're concerned about that. So, Daniel Turner, welcome back to the program.
Martha, it's always great to be on your program. Thanks for having me back.
So, it's true, right? I mean, you can be a patriotic American, you can support what we're doing in Iran, but you still hate the fact that you're paying 50 cents more a gallon than you were last week. So give us just an overview of where we are right now.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I don't want to see higher oil and gas prices. I don't want to pay more at the pump. I know none of your listeners do as well. But in context, and I think it's important to remember that, in context, we're paying exactly what we paid for the 4 years of the Biden administration. I mean, that's how quickly President Trump lowered gas prices when he was sworn in 2025, and what we've had for the last 13 months, and we got used to it. Even the Democrats got used to it. Now all the Democrats are screaming that they want to pay low gas prices, but they did nothing for the 4 years that Biden's policies brought us to this level. So I don't like to say that prices are spiking or they're going through the roof. I prefer to say they're back to the Biden levels. And if you were okay with it for 4 years of Biden because of his green policy, then you have to be okay with it with Trump levels because of his policy to end the world of Islamic terrorism. So maybe a little bit of context helps make it not feel so bad.
So, Daniel, the president did say yesterday that he would be using some of the strategic oil reserve to try to help prices. And I didn't know, and maybe you don't know either, and that's perfectly okay. What's the role of Congress in refilling the strategic oil reserve? Because it seems to me, if you drew it down like President Biden did during an election cycle, that he ought to be able to add back to it without the approval of Congress. But it seems like there's a piece in there that has to do with Congress.
There is, and I think in the regular appropriation of the Department of Energy, there is always money for the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. What President Trump asked for in early last year was an additional amount because we had to replace some 300 million barrels of oil, and that's obviously quite a lot of money. That's how much Biden drained from the Strategic Reserves. So even if you had filled it up at 100,000 barrels a day, which is a lot of oil, right? And taking that out of the supply, we would have felt the price increase. But even at 100,000 barrels a day, we're talking about 5 years to fill up the strategic reserves. That's how much damage Biden did. So the role of Congress is to appropriate that larger amount that President Trump wants that can buy huge quantities of oil, but also at the same point not driving up the price on Americans by cutting out supply.
Yeah.
We're in a pickle. You know, Biden left us in a pickle on a lot of different areas. With Strategic Petroleum Reserve, no doubt. He left us in a pickle with what happened in Iran. Your listeners, your wonderful listeners, need to remember at the end of the first Trump term, Iran was only producing around 300,000 barrels a day because of all the sanctions Trump put on them. By the end of the Biden administration, they were producing 3.2 million barrels a day because Biden and his national security team lifted all of the sanctions. That delta of 2.9 million barrels at $85 a barrel is what funded the October 7th massacre. It's what funded Hamas, what funded Hezbollah, what funded the Houthis in Yemen. It's what funded the IED that a bunch of little punk immigrants threw in New York City a couple of days ago. All of the Islamic terrorism we see is all funded by Iran, and that came from Joe Biden lifting sanctions and making evil countries rich and powerful.
Yeah, it is crazy to me, and that's one of the things, all you folks out there that listen to me that are running for office and want to go to Congress, there ought to be something in the statute where if we draw down the strategic reserve for some reason, you ought to be able to fill it up. And it's something that, I mean, you ought to be able to fill it up without a lot of extra work involved. I really miss Doge. You know, I know they're sort of still around, yes, Daniel, but I think they were doing some great work. And if you really look at the actual spending year over year, you are seeing the benefits of what we were doing in streamlining a lot of processes because the deficits are not as high as they were last year or the year before. And, you know, I want to finish with deficits. I don't want those anymore. I mean, I think we're taxing people enough. But Doge did a good job. They just, you know, they got caught up in this craziness.
100%. And you look at some of the investigations that private citizens have launched. Nick Shirley is the best example of the billions of dollars of fraud by the Somali community in Minnesota. These are private journalists who have uncovered all of this. And it shows that Doge really just was scratching the surface. When you have a government that has $6.9 trillion in annual spending that admits that a huge percentage of it is stolen and is waste and is fraud, we need a lot more oversight. We need a lot more inspectors general. We need a lot more muscle to rid this level of corruption from our budgets because we're all paying for it. And yet every year, I live in the beautiful Commonwealth of Virginia. We just elected a bunch of insane people. And, of course, across the board, it's tax hikes, tax hikes. There's never enough that they think they can tax the private citizens because the spending is endless. And so, yeah, we need Doge back and that level of fiscal sanity returned to the federal government.
We're talking to Daniel Turner from Power of the Future. And, you know, honestly, you would think that discovering fraud, you know, whether it's daycare centers or hospice centers like they just uncovered in California or whatever. You would think that the people in elective office would, it'd be very easy to just say, wow, I didn't know about this. We got to stop this. But instead, in the states like Virginia and Minnesota and California, they're defending it when they find this fraud. And I just don't understand that.
And it doesn't go both ways, because in addition to running Power of the Future, I have a sheep farm here in Shenandoah. If I was committing some sort of fraud, the IRS would come after me. I couldn't say, oh, well, my grandparents were immigrants and I don't know I couldn't get away with it. No one would come to my defense if I was committing some sort of fraud. I'd pay the fines. I'd probably get arrested and go to jail. But yet when our government does it, we all just seem to brush it under the table, and that sort of distance between us and them. Heck, if you and I used insider trading tips to trade stocks, the SEC would come after us and we'd go to jail. But if you're Nancy Pelosi, or if you're Dan Crenshaw and you use insider trading tips to trade stocks, you get to keep the profits. So that separation of us and them, the American people are getting sick and darn tired of it, aren't they?
They are. They really are. So if you could, so the president said yesterday that basically there's some loose ends to tie up. I don't expect him to put boots on the ground. I think that, Iran has made along with a lot of the big mistakes they made a very big mistake out of attacking their neighbors. They've attacked Israel for years, obviously, but really going after their neighbors. What they've done is solidified the Abraham Accords. I think you're going to see a lot of growth in the Abraham Accords. But as we look at this, are we doing the things we need to do in America to get production up? Are you comfortable that as we get through this blip that we're going through, I don't know if it's going to be a month or if it's going to be 6 months, but I don't think it's going to be more than that. What are we doing enough?
Yes, ma'am. And just compare what's happening now to what happened when we first saw Russia invade Ukraine and oil hit $135 a barrel. And it stayed there for weeks on end. We remember in 2022 paying $5.50 a gallon for gas, and then it slowly came down. But oil averaged during those Biden years $90, $95 a barrel. We've had not even 2 weeks of expensive oil after 13 months of $60 a barrel oil. And the difference there is that resilience of American domestic production. The markets, they're jittered right now, no doubt about it. I saw some tankers were attacked yesterday or last night in the Straits. That sent prices up a little higher. Oil markets are jittery, no doubt, but there is great confidence in American domestic production. We're producing more than we've ever produced before, and there's no war on American oil and gas, and that is a huge calming fact. That is a buffer in the markets. I think things will calm down very quickly and prices will drop precipitously. But I do agree with you. I think the American people they're going to realize that in the long run, this is good for peace, for prosperity. It's even good for oil prices. A little bit of short-term pain is worth it.
I tell you what, I know you probably saw this interview of Pierre Poilievre, the conservative leader in Canada, on a podcast called Trigonometry. But he did an extensive discussion on the energy business that they have in Canada and where he wants to take it if he gets in power at some point in time. And I tell you what, I think, keeping our focus on this hemisphere, developing as much as we can, whether it's Brazil or Canada or the United States, it's the way to go. We need to protect our own hemisphere first, then we can worry about the rest of the world.
I agree with you, and I think President Trump is trying to set that tone, and I think he realizes that using oil as a hedge, using it as leverage to keep bad guys from getting rich and powerful. We've already solved the Maduro problem. What's happening in the Middle East is very essential. I think Russia's going to be the next one to fall. Right? We need to stop letting evil dictators use oil to become rich and powerful, because when they do, all they do is terrorism, war, violence against the rest of humanity. So let's use oil for good, because America is the ultimate force for good.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Daniel Turner. It was great to have you with me.
Thank you, Martha. God bless.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.